Okay, we're back. Did you take a break? I hope so. This is part two of our trauma care class. This part of the class is going to have some videos in it. I will put the links to the videos down here so that if they don't work very well, you can play them on your own. Mostly what I want you to know is that these videos are to help you engage in learning in ways other than just having me talk at you, right? So many of these videos are going to have animated drawings and engage other parts of your ways of learning. This first video is created for teachers, and it's about talking about how brain changes happen after a trauma. And the reason that we watch this video is to think particularly about people who might have multiple stressors in their life. So if you're visiting someone in a socioeconomic community that the other parts of their life might be stressful, or if the person you're visiting with has had repeated traumas in different kinds, then this video will help you understand how trauma is even harder for people who experience a constant state of trauma.
Hey, welcome back. Today, I really wanted to think about what's the best way to teach teachers about trauma without getting them distracted with all the technical stuff, and what's the most important thing for them to understand and learn. And I thought that the best way to do it might be to just make a difference between a learning brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and gray and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense, because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kick here is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight for teachers is that the best way to keep students in learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, the baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby protecting it and looking out for danger. So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, and play as a way to learn. So I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below.
So, what do you think? Did you like the video? Did you learn things about brains? It's a
Thanks.
It's an important thing to kind of think about, those intersections that people carry in their life, and it doesn't necessarily explain why some people are hit by trauma harder than others, or why more than one person might be at the same traumatic incident and they don't have the same side effects. But just knowing that brains work differently after a trauma is important, because if you're asking someone to recite, you know, the catechism or like encyclopedic knowledge about things, or they're even curious about why their brain's not working the way it normally does, you now have an explanation about why that is. So I hope you also notice that the importance, again, of people taking the time to notice that they're safe in a space, right? Through the somatic stuff that we talked about earlier, because that can help their brain kind of going into a different mode. The next video that we're going to watch is a video about psychological first aid. I think I mentioned before that the Department of Public Health uses psychological first aid, and that's the language they use for their training programs. The Red Cross, I believe, also uses psychological first aid language, and so it's just helpful to know what types of words people might use in their training. We use Safer R, they use psychological first aid. The difference between the two is really slight. Psychological first aid has 4 steps, and we're gonna have a process that we're learning about that is 6 steps. So know that all 4 of the steps that are a part of psychological first aid are included in what I'm preparing you to be able to do and the steps that we're training you for, but the language is a little bit different. I like this video a lot. It's explains psychological first aid in a way that also shares some of the like basic do's and don'ts of people's experience in kind of trauma care. And so it's important to also think about that, about what works and what doesn't work. And so here is the video on psychological first aid.
At first, I got very nervous and I was worried. I became really worried about not knowing enough, understanding enough about those affected people and their situation and their feelings.
Around the world, a wide range of distressing events happens every day. Wars, natural disasters, accidents, and interpersonal violence. When these things happen in your community, it's natural to want to reach out and help those who are affected. As a person in a position to help others who have gone through a distressing event, you may feel anxious or be at a loss about how to act or what to say to others. Learning psychological first aid, or PFA for short, can enable you to help others and care for yourself. The PFA Field Guide, produced by the World Health Organization and its partners, provides humane, supportive, and practical help to fellow human beings suffering from crisis events. It offers a framework for supporting people in ways that respect their dignity, culture, and abilities, and provides both social and psychological support.
PFA is not professional counseling, and it is not something that only professionals can do. This means anyone, including government officials, development stakeholders, community workers, and perhaps yourself, can provide PFA.
The first principle is to look. This includes checking for safety for people who have obvious, urgent, basic needs. The second principle is to listen. Approach people who may need support and be sure to ask about their needs and concerns, what is really important to them. The third principle is to link. Link people to access the services and supports that help them to address their basic needs. Lastly, and most importantly, when providing PFA, it is essential to take care of yourself and your colleagues. Only by caring for yourself first can you be helpful to others. With these principles and approaches in mind, you can be an effective PFA provider.
So what should a helper do? A helper should respect people's rights to make their own decisions. A helper should be aware and set aside their own biases and prejudice. A helper should make it clear, even if people do not want support right now, that they feel comfortable to ask for help later. A helper should know to respect the privacy of affected people and keep the person's story confidential. A helper should always behave appropriately, considering the person's culture, their age, their gender. But even more important, what should a helper avoid? Obviously, the helper should not exploit the relationship of being a helper. For example, shouldn't ask for money or for any favors. It's so easy for helpers to make false promises or to give information that's not correct just to be helpful. Helpers should be careful not to exaggerate their skills and not to push their help on people. They shouldn't pressure people to tell the details of what happened to them. Helpers may have their own history of traumatic events, but shouldn't share their history with the people they're trying to help. They shouldn't judge the person for their actions that some people may take during crisis.
PFA is a good solution for promoting humanitarian and practical support after disasters. During the past 1 decade, Japan has struggled to promote humanitarian support after disaster based upon our experience of a number of disasters. But still, after 3/11 disaster, we came to find that there were much to learn, and there was so much turmoil in promoting mental health care in that disaster. So in the future, we are convinced that PFA will be a good platform on which we can join forces together and share our expertise.
I still believe that if I had PFA guidance in advance before I went to Fukushima, I would have been more comfortable about working for affected people and give them better services. I'm sure about that.
The integration of mental health and psychosocial support into crisis response is crucial.
All right, so that is PFA. PFA used a lot in international contexts and also by a lot of mental health professionals here in San Francisco. And I'll put a link below for their psychological first aid guide in case you're interested in learning more about it.
At first.
So step 3 is just helping people understand what's going on inside of their bodies, helping people understand that pretty much any feeling they're experiencing is normal, and pretty much any way that they respond to their feelings is normal. You can say things like, I'm sorry this happened. It sounds like it's very difficult. Can you tell me how distressed you are on like a scale of 1 to 10? You can, basically you're checking in with someone to see how they're doing. You don't want to like promise things that you don't know to be certain. If you think something maybe isn't safe that they're up to, you can check in with the person that you are volunteering with to see if if they might know things outside of your cultural understandings about why someone might be talking the way that they are. And if you're concerned about someone's safety as a mandated reporter, you can and should be in touch with other people on the scene. You might like let a first responder know, like, hey, I'm worried about this person's safety. In terms of facilitating what's normal, the framework for kind of thinking more about that is called harm reduction. Harm reduction is the idea that all things can be self-care, all things can be a way of healing or a way of responding to a situation, and that the typical like process of being like, that's bad, don't do it, usually doesn't, well, let's say it this way. If just telling someone their behavior was unsafe or bad could help people like stop being addicted or make healthier food choices or anything else that might be considered unsafe, then we'd all be healthier people, right? And the world would be a lot easier and less complicated than it is. And so harm reduction has the idea that anything other than killing yourself is a better choice than suicide. So there's a lot of ways to hurt yourself that are not what I would recommend, but if you're still alive tomorrow, there's still an opportunity for you to heal and for you to be present in the world. In terms of like addiction recovery and harm reduction, conversations might be about, well, if this drug is meeting a need, but it's keeping you in jeopardy in terms of legal issues, or it's putting you at risk for other health complications, would you consider this alternative? So if there's a legal alternative to the drug that you're taking illegally, would you consider a reduction in the amount of harm that you're having for yourself? And there are some studies that show that helping people reduce their harm and take a step down, kind of like in the same way that people kind of reduce their smoking by maybe chewing gum, like because it's a little less harmful, or right. So that's kind of the idea, is that asking people to do things that are a little less harmful can be better. If you don't know a lot about harm reduction, I recommend this book. It's by Kate Bornstein. It's called 101 Alternatives to Suicides for Teens, Freaks, and Other Outlaws. And it does have some content that might not be for everyone. It's got LGBTQ content in it. It's got stories from Kate Bornstein's life about times when she was suicidal and her experience of bullying. But the part that I really recommend starts on page 83 on the self start guide. It tells you like the basic things that you can do to not take your own life. But then it goes into, it has like this point system. I don't even know if you can see it. There's a point system with hearts and umbrellas and skulls and crossbones. And the 101 ideas are rated based on safety, and the hearts tell you how safe something is. Umbrellas tell you how effective it might be in helping you avoid suicide. And then there's like a difficulty rating, like if it's easy or tricky or hard, or if it might take you a really long time. And then there's ratings for like which things are appropriate maybe for different levels of different like age groups. And then it just simply gives 101 alternatives that are not killing yourself. Again, under the guise that any choice other than taking your own life is a better choice. And so this is kind of the mindset that we ask you to have as you facilitate understanding. You're not telling people that what they're doing is normal for you. Like it wouldn't be, you don't have to say, oh, that sounds like a way that people regularly respond to trauma. It doesn't have to be your way of responding to trauma. It doesn't have to be your family's way of responding to trauma. It doesn't have to be your religion's way of responding to trauma. But in thinking about harm reduction, we just ask you to affirm people's desire to protect themselves and keep themselves safe. And if you even think about the different ways that you care for yourself, the ones that you want to admit out loud, and then the ones that maybe you do when no one's looking, whether it's retail therapy, shopping too much, or drinking more than normal, or whatever your methods of feeling better in a really difficult time are, know that it can be all over the place. And the ways that you've taken care of yourself after really difficult times might have been different when you're a teenager than when you're any of the other ages in between. And so just know that the way someone cares for themselves the 24 hours after a terrible thing happening doesn't mean they're going to make those unsafe choices forever, but they're just getting through this particular period of time in their life. And we want to encourage people to make the safest choices they can. For some people, remember, because your body shuts off a little bit, you can't maybe feel sensation in your fingers or notice when you're hungry. And so some common recommendations is that people like set a timer to remember to eat 3 times a day, and they pay attention to what they eat and how much they eat so they're getting enough nutrition. They don't want to end up in the hospital because they're dehydrated or they didn't eat enough food. And just even assigning a care person or a family member or a friend who really wants to do something to help. They can't stop the bad thing from happening that just happened, but they can help remind someone to eat 3 times a day. And it can be just things like that. It can be, have you thought about childcare? Or have you thought about if you want to take work off tomorrow, or if you're able to take off work tomorrow? Have you thought about these things because they're normal to think about? So what are your expectations? As you think about what you might encounter as a volunteer, as an SFPD community chaplain, I know for me, when I am driving to something terrible that is happening, I'm imagining every terrible thing that could go wrong. I'm imagining feeling uncomfortable, having to talk to strangers in a strange place. I imagine saying the wrong thing in front of first responders and feeling bad that I didn't do the right thing, and I wanted to do the right thing, but it didn't happen. And I expect people to be traumatized and to have PTSD. I expect to maybe see things that I wouldn't normally see, maybe blood or police tape or sirens. I expect that if a first responder calls for help, it's probably bad. And so most of my expectations are not positive. Take a second, check in with yourself, see what your expectations are. No, for real, check in. This video is a video that is made for people who do like support calls after a big disaster. And it's about what they should expect from people they talk to on the phone when they're offering advice. And so I hope this video helps you think of more things that you can expect before things happen.
Engaging with distressed callers is difficult business, but you can help to anchor your calm, supportive presence by remembering these 4 guidelines when engaging with callers in distress. First, no one who sees a disaster is untouched by it. While reactions to a disaster or stressful events vary greatly among people, we must assume that all individuals are affected at some level. This means that your caller may be a witness, or a survivor, or a family member of a survivor, or a neighbor of a person, or a caller who just says that they're fine. On some level, traumatic events increase stress for anyone who experiences it, but each person will need differing levels of support and care. The second guideline is to expect normal recovery. People are resilient. Even after the World Trade Tower collapsed, 65% of New Yorkers surveyed in one large study reported 1 or fewer symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Clearly, not everyone needs a direct mental health intervention. Much of what people need is support, information, and resources, and you are already providing much of this in your 2-on-1 services. Next, expect that people pull together. Communities will pull together during times of great distress. Even communities who are experiencing significant conflict prior to the disaster event will come together to deal with the pressing issues at hand. In your work supporting callers and providing community referrals, you are increasing the likelihood that the community will maintain its cohesion over time. Take comfort knowing that there are many other people who will support an impacted community. The fourth guideline is to remember that stress and grief are normal reactions. It is important to remember that disasters, especially mass casualty events, are unusual events, and stress and grief are normal reactions to them. Unless a survivor's initial response is an obvious risk to self or others, stress and grief reactions are to be expected and will most likely not cause long-term mental impacts. With these expectations in mind, people can greatly benefit from your small, intentional interventions to decrease stress. To learn some of these interventions, we move on to our next section, introducing what you can do to reduce stress and promote adaptive functioning.
So, was I right? I wasn't right about my expectations. There's a lot more positive expectations that you can expect when you go to something. And so all this talk about trauma might leave you thinking, oh man, everything happens terribly and it's bad for everyone, when the studies show that most people you encounter will be fine. You might not know that because you only engage with people or interact with them during this moment of crisis, but it's really important to remember that their lives didn't stop just because you stopped being in their presence. And so reminding yourself that people get better, that they're not who they are in an emergency every day of their lives is really super important for not getting burnout and not feeling really overwhelmed by this work. So let's look at the next slide. All right, hold on. Here we go. Step 4 is encouraging effective coping. This can mean simple things like, how can I help you? How can I help right now? It could be just proactively when a police officer is handing out a bunch of business cards to like collect them, or write things down in really big letters because you know that people's lives kind of narrow, their vision gets very tunnel vision. It's hard to read items when you're super stressed out, and so the bigger they're written down, the better, and that person might be able to read them in the aftermath of a trauma. It definitely means connecting people to their support system. The idea is that you're there until someone better shows up. That could be someone smarter who's a therapist. It could be someone who's a member of their family or from their own faith community, or just their neighbors. Because what you want to do is connect people to the support system that will care for them every other day after this. And the sooner you get them support from the people who are going to be in their life long term, the better it will be, because they'll be resourced every day, and you can leave knowing that you didn't leave them alone if there was someone you can connect them to. If a person's unsure, you can offer explanatory guidance. So you can say things like, right now your body's shut down, you have tunnel vision. You can let them know that they might forget to eat. You can give them anticipatory guidance. You can say, you know, in a couple days, in like 3 days, this might really, really hit you. All these chemicals are going to dump. You can give them stress management advice. You can give them self-care tips. And the best way to do this is like with anything, right? Like a good therapist sits there and listens to you. And then when you say out loud solutions to your own problem, the good therapist just simply repeats them back to you. And the good chaplain is exactly the same. You can ask people, in the past, when something hard has happened, what has helped you? And in asking that question, they can give you a list of answers. They might say, I don't know, nothing. And you can say, well, what do you imagine could help you? And helping people get connected to things can be really helpful. There's a study that says that the act of like chewing, the act of chewing makes chemicals happen that help us feel less stressed out. It's part of why eating food after a trauma feels good, because it's the chewing. And so they did a study, and it said that chewing gum helps kids do better on tests because they're less stressed out. Well, a lot of kids can't chew gum in school because you're not supposed to chew gum at school. And so they did a study that says imagining you're chewing gum. Just maybe you move your chin. Just imagining you're chewing gum. Maybe you don't move your chin. You got to tell the teachers so that they know that the kids don't actually have gum. But just closing your eyes for a few minutes, imagining you're chewing gum can help you feel less stressed out. So even imagining support, imagining love, imagining care can be helpful for people. You can help people problem solve. You can say, what are the things that you think might be hard over the next 3 days? And you can help them make a plan. You can help them think through where they're going to park their car because of street sweeping. You can, anything you help them problem solve with. Your brain's not in survival mode, so it's going to be helpful for someone in survival mode to do something with you. Or you can just merely be a cheerleader. Support. When someone is saying things that are supportive of their life, cheer for them. When they're talking about things that are difficult, care for them and have empathy. Guided meditation time. So you might or might not be into meditation. You might think, all right, this is the best. Meditation's my jam. You might have never heard of loving kindness before. You might be like, yeah, that's my thing. I hang out at the Zen Center. It's awesome. Part of the reason we're doing this guided meditation is because I just told you imagining things makes them better, and I'm going to prove it. And because statistically in San Francisco, more people don't ascribe to a traditional churchy kind of faith religion. So there are more people who do not express a particular faith than who claim a particular kind of faith. And so knowing how to do a guided meditation, knowing how to talk about loving kindness, knowing how to help people's hearts accept love and embrace love, gonna happen more times, statistics say, than praying with people. All right, so wherever you're located, remember that your body exists. Wiggle your toes. Notice that you're in the room. Maybe put your feet flat on the floor. Find a position that's comfortable. If your back hurts, you can wiggle it out. If you are someone who feels comfortable and is able to focus the best by closing your eyes, you can do that, but you don't have to. Now that you're in a position that is comfortable, I invite you to focus on your heart or any part of your body where you notice love existing. It can be a tiny speck, it can be something big, maybe it feels warm, maybe it has a color. Just notice where love resides in your body. If love resides in lots of places, maybe they're charged with magnets and they all clump together just for right now, forming one big bunch of love inside of you. Now imagine that love inside of you growing. Maybe it's getting warmer. Maybe it's getting brighter and filling more parts of your body, all the way down to your toes, all the way up to your shoulders, all the way down to your fingertips, all the way up to the crown of your head, throughout your pelvis. Imagine all the love you've ever experienced, the wisdom you've gained from elders. Imagine all the love in the history of your life getting bigger and collecting inside of you, so big that it starts to spill out. Spilling out your fingertips, spilling out your toes, filling out the crown of your head, maybe spilling out of your ears, warming up the world around you. First, just the room you're in, filling it with love, then maybe the whole building, then maybe your whole city filling with love, spilling down and around. And then maybe the entire state of California or the state that you are in, and maybe all the way across the United States. Maybe even big enough to spill into the oceans, and maybe big enough to just cover the whole world in a big, bright love. Imagine that love is infinite, multiplies like bunnies, and there's enough for everyone. And when other people receive it from you, it doesn't take away the amount of love you have, but it just encourages more love to grow bigger and bigger, sharing this loving, kind warmth with everything. Imagine also that every single being on this earth, everything that breathes and everything that grows and everything that churns, generating its own love, could be the same color or a different color, but it's growing bigger. And press your feet firmly into the ground. And as if there are roots coming out the bottom of your feet, soaking up the love from the entirety of the cosmos around you, love from the stars, love from the sun, love from the moon, love from the wind, love from the things that crawl and the things that fly, love from the things that walk, love from the things that swim, love from all the earth. Love from the things that are inorganic, the metal, the steel, love from every noise and sound and smell, love, filling you, filling you, filling you. Infinite, unquenchable. And knowing that love is available, love is always accessible, love is always within reach and never runs out. Notice again your body, opening your eyes maybe and taking a look at the wonder that is you, looking at your hands and your feet, noticing the room around you and where you're located, firmly back in this space. This loving kindness meditation is inspired to remind you how when we sink into the goodness and the kindness and the compassion of the world, it makes us feel good. Even if meditation's not your thing, it's possible that your breathing has slowed and your fear has stopped. The sense of needing to take notes maybe ended, and if nothing else, you got this much farther in the video. And if someone wants to have a meditation with you or to have positivity with you, you now have some language for how you can share that with others. Step 5, the R, is the restoration of functioning and referral for continued care. And the point of this step is not because by the time people are done talking to you, they're going to be fixed and better and the crisis will be 100% over. But this is a question that seeks to find out, is someone okay enough for you to leave? Is someone safe enough? Are they a threat to themselves? Are they a threat to others? Do they need other referrals to come before you leave? Or are they going to be okay? So you might say, how do you feel now after we talked? You might give them referral information, and I have some handouts you can give to people. This might be a time when you're just checking in if someone's going to be able to make it through the night. You've made a plan with them in the previous step about how to solve some of their tasks, and now you're just assessing if they're able to do it, if they feel comfortable, and seeing when the right moment to end your time with them might be. This is not a perfect thing to do. I've often, I've found that I tend to stay between 4 and 5 hours with people after something is happening. And in that time period, there's like 20 times when I could leave. There is no way to know which one is the right time to leave. You got to kind of go with your gut, and having a partner might be really helpful in this, and doing reflection afterwards might be helpful too. I give you permission to make mistakes and to do it wrong, because it's really not perfect. But if you've ever had a conversation with someone where you like have to talk about leaving 8 times as you walk to the door before you actually go, this is the part of the conversation where you at least for the first time say, hey, are you doing okay? Do you still need me? And then maybe another cycle of conversation happens again, but you get closer to the door. In the next section, we're going to talk about compassion fatigue. We're going to talk about how to take care of yourself, but first you need to take a break. Take 10 minutes and then come back. Thank you for sticking in there this long.